This is the Awaken Life podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Scott Landis. How can you live an absolutely fulfilling and purpose-filled life, maintain a passionate, intimate relationship, all while raising kids and growing multiple streams of income? That's the big question we seek to answer on this podcast by interviewing people who are already doing it. One thing we know for sure, it takes a community to do it well. So thank you for being a part of the Awaken Life community. Looking forward to growing with you. Now on with the episode. Welcome to the Awaken Life podcast with Scott Landis. And today my guest is Josh Dirks, who is a pioneer. For the past 20 years, he's lived on the bleeding edge of technology and digital marketing as a social media creative agency. Josh prides himself on his ability to empower consumers on behalf of brands through high quality content, online engagement, narrowcasting, and the leveraging of consumer data to provide timely experiences. Way back in 2009, Josh founded one of the first social media only creative agencies in the US called Project Bionic, and has spent the last 13 years helping clients across the globe create desired business outcomes via social media channels. Josh is also a father, tech geek, sports fanatic, lover of the outdoors, and new media thought leader who exists right on the cusp of Gen X and millennials, providing him a unique outlook on the world. Josh is wise beyond his years and enjoys speaking to groups of all sizes about both his professional journey and his extensive knowledge of new media trends and their impact on our ever-evolving daily lives. Josh Dirks, welcome to Awaken Life podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here today. Really appreciate you having me on, and excited to jam out some great thoughts today and give the audience some content that they can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, so as we were talking just before we went live here, this whole idea, there's information in that I have no idea about this. So I'm going to be very naive, asking very curious questions, but start with just the idea of wow, being a pioneer in the social media space, unpack that a bit and kind of, how did that start and how did it evolve, all that stuff?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. It's definitely a journey of parlaying one experience in the other. During my time at door-to-door moving and storage back in 2002 through 2004, I got exposed to online marketing, from the Google AdWords SEM stuff to SEO work. My career then from there was working in kind of SEO on an international level. Then I did a web development shop. But then when I got to Intercom as director of digital, I was working for this large broadcaster, right? And we'd always talk about the fact of hey, here in Seattle, we have a station called KSW. And if you talk to the sales reps, they'll tell you it's like the steel toe wearing, hard hat wearing, light beer drinking audience, right? But as I'd go around town, I'd go into some of the biggest law firms or accounting agencies in the city, and I'd hear them listen to KSW. And I thought to myself, man, it's going to be a real bummer to be those guys, because here they go to commercial break. At every commercial that KSW is distributing has very little focus on what these attorneys are doing or these accountants are doing at any given time. And I thought, given the fact that we as consumers back then were starting to give data about ourselves to the channels and starting to tell people about and define for the networks who we were, what if we could find a medium that allowed us to use that data and put timely messaging in front of people that took that into account? For example, Scott, if you love tacos and I love burritos, why would I ever show you a burrito ad? And why would you ever show me a taco ad, right? So we can start to think about these things in a more narrowcast mechanism instead of trying to have 1 million people in our audience. What if we had little segments of 10, 30, 40,000 people that equaled the million, but we had all these micro messages going out because we were being diligent with the data they were giving us. We're being respectful in the fact that we were taking that in and trying to understand the consumer. And then we were placing that along the consumer journey in a way that not only went ahead and was relatable and interesting to the end consumer, but it showed that the brand cared in a way that built some engagement and some traction that ultimately built trial and sales. And then ultimately, if you kept that relationship going and everything worked, then there was loyalty, right? And that's a lot of what we were talking about back in 08, 09 was loyalty and how you got consumers to repeat buy and things like that. So in June of 2009, stepped out of my cushy corporate job and stepped out into the world of social media. I've been playing with Twitter and YouTube. Facebook finally came out of the EDU environment. I really realized these were the networks we're going to finally be able to do this at scale. And so with a couple of partners in my basement in West Seattle, we started a company called Social Creature Media. And 19 months later, we morphed into Project Bionic, and we've been doing that now for the last 14 years, which has been a really fun and exciting journey overall. We really see the space go from being really immature to mature to now a lot of headwind, a lot of other things going on at any given time. So it's been a very interesting journey that you have to continue to navigate and be nimble in, and continue to go ahead and develop and create and be innovative in how you do things.
So these days, when you say stuff like, provide an ad to the consumer that would be more relevant to that specific person based on their preferences, I think even at my level, I think anybody who's in marketing would be like, yeah, duh, that's what we do, right? That sounds like just kind of get your foot in the door in marketing now, but back then that was like, people would have no idea what you're talking about. They're like, how the heck do you do that? Am I right? Like, was that like just blank stare a lot? I mean, obviously in some generation, the millennial Gen X generation that you said you're part of, they would maybe know, but anybody older than that would be like blank stare. Like, what are you talking about? Is that right?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting moment of trying to teach or coach up, right? Like I've always been one of the younger guys in the room, although that's changing now that I'm in my 40s. But I was always the younger guy in the room, that some of the stuff came to me very naturally. And so part of my job in evangelizing the space is helping people understand, especially senior business leaders, right? So I came up with this whole analogy, Scott, around the village, right? If you think about us as a species on the planet, for more time in our history on the planet, we actually existed in small villages versus where we exist post-industrial revolution, right? And the reason we combined in those villages was because of the need for survival. So these villages were between 50 and 300 people, right? And when you came into that village, you didn't just go to the mass marketing at the time, the little wood sign that hung outside the shops. You'd go to somebody at the pub or at your church or wherever you were at and say, hey, who's your blacksmith or who's your silver worker or whatever? And they'd say, this is who I go to. And so you would go there because that referral was really keen and they're part of the community and they were good at their job. They had fair pricing, they had good customer service, and they stood behind their product. And so generationally, business thrived. You could pass that down to your kids. And so business actually existed inside these villages for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? However, as we got into the Industrial Revolution, we all started amassing in these large cities. That need for survival, that shared independency went away. And so all of a sudden, what backfilled, we as a species actually started siloing off into no networks. So whether, you're Protestant, I'm Catholic, or, you're from Germany and I'm from Italy. So we started segmenting ourselves into these small communities that no longer were interconnected. And so marketers and brands still had a need to get messaging out. So what backfilled that was the village crier, the newspaper, the radio, and the television. You get into the late 70s, there was a study done by Stanford that said a person using the technology they had available to them at the time could only meaningfully touch between 9 and 12 people. Well, that's a staggeringly different number than was happening 250, 300 years prior in the village scenario, right? Because every day you're touching between 50 and 300 people. And so we had a need to touch more people as a species. We're being muzzled. So social media came out, or even the early internet, the internet has always been social, whether it's chat rooms or those types of things where you're having a shared communal experience, right? But you're talking to more people, connecting with more people. What's really ironic is if you start to map back where social stands today, the average Facebook user, Instagram user only has about 250, 300 friends in their channel, right? That's who they trust. And it literally maps back to those old villages from a psychological standpoint, right? And that's where we're at. So instead of thinking about marketing in hundreds of millions, like we were talked about, or the newspaper, what if we could throw an individual newspaper to each community is what I tell people. And that really helps it resonate with people. They go, oh, I get that now. And now we're just doing that same village building, but we're doing it online via these social channels at the end of the day.
Wow. Okay. So that idea of being able to send a newspaper to that small group, that small community, I really like the sound of that. Where my mind started going is, doing these CEO mastermind groups online now, post-COVID. Just those connections, it was kind of interwoven in your analogy there. Like connections have been challenging, authentic connections for sure, pretty much since social media has been around. Like taking that gigantic number and putting it down to a smaller community is an important part of what I do. And I don't need to market to the masses. I don't need hundreds of thousands of people. I don't even need 10,000 people. I need a few hundred. And I have a very viable business. So when you said, if I could just find that, you said 250 so Facebook users that are subscribed to my newspaper, that's an attractive thought. Where would you go with my business or with me on that? Like, because I'm sure a lot of people listening could relate to that being an attractive concept.
Yeah, and this is where the networks have matured too, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say that Facebook actually knows a person's about to go through a divorce 6 months before the divorce even starts in any way, shape, or form, right?
You're kidding. Wow.
So there's
That's
obviously
amazing.
things we are doing and signals we
Mm-hmm.
are giving off that help the networks really understand who we are. But because they're mapping all of these people and who they are, there's a really powerful tool that they have called custom audiences, where you can literally take your customer list and upload it in a hash. A hash is a way of securing both sides of the data, right? So Facebook goes through, or Meta goes through and takes those email addresses and they match them to users. They map them back to users online. And then they go ahead and delete the hash. They don't keep it or anything like that. So it's not like they're doing something weird with it, but they're just mapping. So if you said you had 10,000 customers that came through your program over the last 5 years, if you onboarded those, Facebook would go, great, we've matched 5,000, for example. And then as you start to interact with them, Facebook would say, hey, I have a lookalike audience, same type of position, same state, same interests, same everything. But now I have 20,000 over here that I can start to map to and advertise to and reach, right? And so now the heavy lifting is being done for you as the data has started to erode and people have become concerned that Meta knows that you like Field of Dreams and that you voted Democrat last
Mm-hmm.
calendar cycle, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
really is not that big of a deal. If you know what our politicians have on us data-wise or our government has on data-wise, what Meta has on us is really innocuous at the end of the day. But good for everybody for being panicked about it. Congratulations, you made marketing worse, not better. But as you think about that stuff, now it's really incumbent upon us where 5-6 years ago, you could go ahead and find those triangulations to find those interests. Now it's really incumbent upon business leaders like ourselves to start to develop our first party data aspect. Because if we own our data and it's data we have captured and we have permission to use, we now can use that to go through and leverage these tools and these lookalike audiences going forward. And so that's a big component of kind of how we look at when we help a partner is really understanding what data they have today, what they own, who their customer has historically been, and who they want to conquer long-term, right? And then start to help set up those data paths so we start to go ahead and mine and find those smaller communities that start to reach that we know have a propensity to buy, use, or interact with a brand, service, or company like we represent.
Okay, so as Facebook has the lookalike. So again, to summarize what you said, if I know the last, over the last 10 years, the customers who have onboarded with me, I can kind of have that profile uploaded or inputted into some kind of Facebook algorithm. It shows me a lookalike audience that kind of based on what you've uploaded here, there's another group here that would probably behave, have preferences the same way. And that's a really good way to target. And then I heard you say our first party data, and that's something different, but and you can correct me where I'm wrong on any of this, but what I think I'm hearing is, so the way that Facebook does all that stuff I just described, internally in-house and that's what first party data is. My own database, we can kind of do a similar thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and for clarity, I just use Facebook as the example. Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, right. TikTok, Snapchat, all have these same functionalities now because they're mapping the personas of the users, right?
Right.
So for example, with you being a coach and working with CEOs and being a coach on things, you know that in the business world, there's 35% of CEOs or business leaders that are like, I don't need a coach. I've got it figured out. I don't need to go ahead and talk to anybody. Get the heck out of here. Right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
for you, it would be really inefficient to even reach that 35 or 40% that already got it all figured out and they're good to go. Right.
Right.
So back in the day, we could find like the titles and things like that. We didn't know who used coaching. By you going through and telling the platforms, hey, here's who's come through my program in the past and what I do. Now the platforms go, oh, we can cleave off the 40% that will never use a coach. And now we're looking for 10 or 15% within that 60% that is the business leader, but also has a propensity to use coaching and guidance and those types of services outside of their of what they daily do, right? And
Mhm.
that's how you start to get that flywheel turning of reaching a really highly targeted group of people. And when I talk about, back in the day, I used to be able to go into Facebook and look down like to county levels and be able to tell you whether Spider-Man or Batman was more popular in the neighborhood, right?
Hmm.
One of my very first experiences was around the Chicago Blackhawks going to the Stanley Cup final in 2009.
Hmm.
I had a daughter who was, 6 months old, 7 months old at the time as they were going. And so for the first time in North American history, my wife at the time gave me permission to actually go and go to the bar to watch a hockey game. But I knew that me yelling at TV by myself was not a good idea. And so I went into Facebook, created a watch event just in a Facebook event, right? But I could look for people that were between the ages of 25 and 45, that had kids under the age of 2 in the house that were Chicago Blackhawks fans. And it
Huh.
surfaced there was 28 of us in the neighborhood. Now, because of security data, you can't do that anymore. Like that doesn't happen. You got to have like 1,000 or 10,000. You have some big minimums, right? But back
Okay.
then you could see really granular into communities and data. That was
Wow.
all third-party data, right? That was data that I didn't own, that Facebook had procured through their data partners. And so that was third-party data we were accessing.
Okay.
Because of the 2016 election, subsequently the 2020 election, and the way we're dealing with third-party data today, third-party data has been turned off in a big way. We've been
Hmm.
talking a lot about this for the last 5 years, and that's why it's so important that you think about your marketing programs and your plans, because whether it's those old email addresses you captured at trade shows or whatever it is, those are highly valuable in helping instrument the networks to understand who your target prospects are, who your target customers are, who your customers are not in some examples, right? And
Mhm.
geographically and psychographically, who and what they make up, right? And so
Mhm.
now, like, again, 5, 6, 10 years ago, it was much easier to get in and make these micro decisions about who you're going to target. That's become much harder today because of people's fear around their personal data. And so because of
Mhm.
that, now it's really incumbent upon us to be capturing first party data that we begin to use that helps that then us target and further the algorithms to reach the people that we know we can help.
Okay. So obviously Project Bionic does some of that you're describing, or at least has that knowledge to use. But the bottom line is it's social media creative, right? So being an expert on not just targeting, but creating engagement, is that something that Project Bionic does? And what else?
Yeah, great question, Scott. So if you think we start with strategy is always the top of what we got to start with, right? We got to understand. And for now, it's cool because a lot of the brands we get to the honor or pleasure of working with, they come to us and they've already been in social media for a while. So they have a lot of data
Mm.
that's available to them. So what we love to
Gotcha.
do is do 2 parallel paths when we start with the client. Interview the client about, hey, what do you want? What's your hopes and dreams? When you grow up, who do you want to be? What's historically been your business? What do you see the business being in the future? All those good things that all consultants and marketing people should be doing when they take on a new client, right? At the same time, we're using their past data to look out and understand who they've been reaching, why they've been reaching those people, and what they've been engaging with, and what content really matters to the current audience they have. What's interesting in that, though, is they'll tell us, a regionally based brand, Pacific Northwest will tell us, hey, we want to be this regional brand, but we'll look at their audience and they'll have 10,000 followers in Malaysia, for example.
Sure.
You're like, well, why is this happening? Like, oh, well, one of our guys thought it'd be cool to have 10,000 followers, so we went out and bought these followers.
Mm.
Well, what they're doing actually is impacting their own results, because at the end of the day, the quality score of the audience size versus the engagement is not there. So they've impacted. So, that's not an actual true thing at the end of the day, right? So as we get those things figured out, and I tell people all the time, I will find out where the bodies are buried. So just tell me ahead of time, we'll go from there. And then as we get all that information and know where they want to go, we build strategy behind that. And that strategy includes everything from the audience identification and how we go ahead and how we're going to reach them, to then the content. And as we talk about content, as you just talked about the customer funnel, if you will, Scott, is like, hey, you got to be aware of something before you can engage with them, right? So we start to think about the customer funnel in a way where as we start campaigns for clients, there's an awareness of who the brand is and giving them something that they care about. Then you invite them in to engage with you. And as they engage with you and start to talk to you, all of a sudden now, are you trustworthy? Do you have a team of people that are responding and doing that stuff? And that's where our community management team comes in. And then below that, once I've bought the product or taken on the service, then can I interact with you still, or are you still there, and will you stand behind your product? And so we can go ahead and ladder communication for all of those different pieces of the funnel at the end of the day. And ultimately then that also starts bringing us back business intelligence, where we can start to tell the client, hey, this product or service is misaligned with the community or with the client's expectations, and here's why. Hey, did you know you have 5,000 people asking for this thing too, right? And so also it becomes a business intelligence center that we start to get a hold of. But then also you got to align the creative with the current brand. So then we put brand examples and how it's going to work and all that kind of stuff. And then we have the paid strategy that encompasses that, right? So then our clients either will have us help train and consult and continue to go ahead and work with their internal team, and or they will come through and they will start to go ahead and we will do it for them. We'll execute everything on their behalf.
Are you a business owner who's looking to sharpen your performance in health, wealth, and relationships? And do you want to take your leadership skills to the next level and grow your business to new heights? If so, I have something special for you. That's right, I'm talking about Awaken Life Academy, the Just Show Up training program designed to help you achieve your full potential as a leader and entrepreneur. Based on a Harvard Business Review study that showed the importance of regular and consistent training during times of economic hardship, our program is tailored to meet the specific needs of business owners like you who want to improve their health, wealth, and relationships while building a successful business, even in hard times. Our expert-led training sessions will provide you with the skills and the mindset needed to succeed in all areas of your life. We'll help you develop a strong leadership style, improve your decision-making skills, boost your confidence as a business owner. You'll also learn how to balance your work and personal life, maintain good health, and build strong relationships with your team, clients, and loved ones. With just one group session a month, you can join our community of like-minded business owners who share your passion for growth and development. Our group training format provides a supportive community where you can collaborate and learn from others, develop the personal discipline you're craving, and the determination to improve every aspect of your life and business. You'll receive ongoing support and guidance from our team of experts and the community, as well as access to exclusive resources and tools to help you achieve your goals. Don't settle for mediocrity. Join the Awaken Life Academy today and start unlocking your full potential as a leader and entrepreneur. To learn more or to register for the next group session, go to awakenlifeacademy.com. So I like that term, business intelligence. You're raising the business intelligence. So is there anything else that are tips for somebody? Obviously, if somebody can come and engage with Project Bionic and work with you, they're going to get all that. Somebody who is starting out, maybe not ready for that level of service, are there any other tips that they would do to raise their business intelligence? Oh, and before you go there, just for context, as a business owner, you're a founder, CEO of your company, right? I'm curious for context, like you're in a place where you don't necessarily, if I'm wrong, let me know, but you don't necessarily have to be in the middle of the business anymore. You've kind of gotten to a place where you have a true business that can run without you. Are you in that stage?
I was definitely in that stage. We recently had one of the people that was really key to that. She's left the business, so I've come back and are helping run it a lot more on a daily basis right now.
Gotcha.
And we'll find some new talent there. I think it's kind of the way of the world right now and kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
But this is a space too, Scott, that at 44 years of age, it's starting to pass me by. And I have to be honest about that too. I think that I've got some people that work for me that I don't want to call young people, because they're not. They're in their 20s and 30s now, but they've been with me many years, and their knowledge and their understanding of how things work, or why you use that feature inside a social network, or how this little technology works to help go ahead and bring people to you. They have that in spades. I mean, my head of community management, she can literally look at a response from one of our partners, go, don't use that word and don't use that word. We have creative writers on our team that have been now with us, more than 5 years, and both of them are just so good about picking that stuff up. And so really the business has passed me by from the ability to lead, like from a how it works standpoint. I can still do strategy. I can still work on the data side. I can work on that kind of stuff. But the team now is really carrying the torch when it comes to that creative aspect and how things work, and how to best implement a piece of content in a way that gets the desired outcomes we want, because it's just changed so much. I mean, shoot, when we started, Scott, it was mostly copy. We had copywriters, right? And today it's all around video and visuals and that kind of stuff, right? So it's just changed so much, and like what the tools are and the craft. And so I think me being a good steward of the business is understanding what my role is and really empowering my people to be the best at what they do when it comes to client strategy and execution for our clients.
Yeah.
You kind of asked before that about tips for, small business, solopreneurs, that kind of stuff. And I think what I always try to tell, and I've worked with a lot of them, and so I get it. It's a hard world. They know they have to be there. For a lot of them, they didn't grow up in the social space, so it feels weird and awkward. And so what I always tell people is, like, getting into a social media habit is just like going to the gym. It's one of those situations where you get to the gym the first time, you're like, am I using this machine right? Do my clothes look right? And you're spending more time being self-conscious about what you're doing. But that's like anything new that you take on, right? It takes time, and it takes muscle memory and learning before it becomes innate to you, right? But if you keep at it, after the 3 months, you're starting to set new goals, and you've got friends at the gym and all that kind of stuff. And after a year, you're like ingrained in the culture and you feel just at home in it, right? So I think the first thing is just admitting to yourself that as you enter this space, it's gonna feel awkward. It's gonna feel weird. There's gonna be moments where you gotta humble brag. There's moments where you gotta promote yourself. Your mom told you not to talk about yourself, right, at cocktail parties or whatever it was. And so there's a little bit of a mindset that you gotta shift through to get there. But I find like the biggest mistake that I see is that people think of social media as the last thing they do in their day. And so they get to 5:30, they go, oh crud, I didn't put up something on Twitter and Facebook today, so what am I going to write about? And they just start to try, either run around the office or look at emails for the day and try to find some nuggets that they're going to put out there. And that's when social is just kind of a spray and pray methodology all over again. And so that's where really sitting down and building a strategy, even over a half day. And when I talk about strategy, like, who are your key customer targets? Okay, great. Are they on Facebook? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Instagram? Are they on TikTok, right? Like, figure out, because each of the networks has a little bit of a different user base. And just like we talked about in traditional media, everybody has their favorite traditional radio station. We call them P1s, right? And then you're a P2 of another station, a P3 of maybe a third station, but that's about as deep as you go unless you have a lot of commercial or that kind of stuff going on. And people use social media very much the same way. I love Twitter. I am a Twitter head. I'm sad about Elon, but at the end of the day, I continue to use Twitter and love Twitter, right? And so understand who your audience is and where they're at. Additionally, be really honest with yourself once you've identified that, to go, hey, if I'm trying to reach young millennials, that's great, but am I really good with video yet? Maybe not there yet. So maybe I'm going to stay over here on Instagram and some of that kind of stuff, and give yourself that ability, right, to build that muscle memory and that learned skill up to enter that kind of stuff. Video is obviously the hardest type of content to ultimately create, and takes the most time, and is why it's the most expensive. So, okay, now I know who my audiences are. I know which networks I should be on and what kind of content I go on there. Now think about things we call content wells. In content wells, you should have 5 or 6 of them, and they should be kind of headers around things that you do or things you want people to know about you, right? Like in your business, I work with business leaders, they want to know who you are. They want to know about your personal life. They want to know that kind of stuff. So who is Scott, right? Then they probably want to know about your program and what people are saying about your program, what they're going to get from it, right? Then they're going to want endorsements, reviews, like what have other CEOs and leaders said about it? So that's another content well, right? But then people, ultimately identify with people they like. And so, what are the lifestyle things, the other things that make Scott Landis who he is, and gives you that great business vantage point and perspective. And then last but not least, maybe there's resources, books you read, podcasts you're looking at, people to connect with, local events that you know about, right? And so those are your 6 content wells. If you think about then taking a calendar and setting it out and laying out your content wells each day or every other day, or however often you want to be posting, right?
Mhm.
Then when you get to that 5:30, instead of being like, oh crud, I got to post something, what am I going to post about? You're like, oh, I'm posting the cool resource or tool I found. I know exactly what I'm going to talk about. Here it is, and off it goes, right?
Mm.
And last but not least, I think the most important component of things is community management. People forget that. They think when they're posts, they're done. Well, if you're just posting and you're not responding to your audience, I got bad news for you. You're not doing social media, you're doing database marketing. Social media does not begin until the brand reaches across that digital divide and shakes the hand of the client. And that's by reacting to their responses, seeing a question, answering it with that. At least go through and like the people that actually go ahead and reward them by liking their comments and what they do with you. And then ultimately people are sharing content, or you become trusted and they're sharing content about you, like UGC as we call it in the industry. When you start posting that kind of stuff out, all of a sudden it becomes very viral and more people want to see their picture up there, right? And so, as I say, success for small businesses and social media is about setting up the stage, turning on lights and turning on the microphone, and starting to invite your customers to the table to start telling your story as well or better than you can, because they have a personal connection with it, and they are voted every day with their dollars to use you. And that's really a powerful thing that really gets the flywheel turning. But I think small business owners sometimes just jump over all of those things, just go, well, I have a network, I'm just going to start posting. It just becomes willy-nilly and it becomes tiring. They don't get the results they want. They don't see the numbers moving. And long term, they just kind of fade out. And that's why you have so many abandoned, corporate social channels or handles out there on these different networks.
Yeah. Yeah. So being more strategic, those content wells, it reminds me, so I've heard somebody say like you could have motivational Monday. Like I've heard people say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they've got a different like header for each one of those. Is that an example of what you're saying with content wells? Like they kind of just have it based on the days of the week which they're going to post. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that can be fine, but that's an initial start. I also want to tell people, like, if you have a few dollars to put behind, and I'm talking about $5-10 to actually promote and boost your content, you probably only need to post 2 or 3 times a week. You don't necessarily need to be posting all the time. Now, there's some networks that really reward that, like TikTok rewards people. Be Real has a whole algorithm you got to post every time they tell you to post because they want to see what's going on with you, right? So there's some networks that kind of reward that, but for legacy channels like Facebook and LinkedIn, even Instagram to a point, and YouTube, higher quality less often is better than just doing low quality all the time type stuff. The days of Twitter, like I'm eating breakfast, I'm brushing my teeth now, getting my car to go to work, those days have kind of gone, the bygones. And the other thing is, if you watch television shows, you're into certain things. When you watch a storyline play out and you see the same storyline over and over and over again, do you really want to watch another NCIS, New Orleans, or whatever it is? Now, there's a percentage that does, but if you become so robotic in how you're posting content, I think you also do yourself a disadvantage of becoming too scheduled and too mechanized, and you're not as human. I mean, the whole idea behind Project Bionic is that project's a reminder to ourselves that we're just temporary and that we can be replaced at any given time. But Bionic, in the word of like laying humanness over the ones and zeros of the internet and making it more human in nature, right? That's the Bionic side of things. So I think as you go through it, it's nice to have that kind of cadence, but also it can become tiring to the audience. So challenge yourself to kind of break rules and post content at different times a day, different times a week to find out what really works with you and your audience at the end of the day.
Yeah, I like that. So higher quality for your posts, avoid the whole thing of being predictable, like a boring show that's the same plot every time. That's good. And so just out of, I mean, I think we've all seen the boost content thing, but what's really going on there from your perspective? Like, I've heard good things about hitting that boost button and not good things. And, some people say, never touch that, Some people say, I love it. So what's really going on?
Well, it's funny because earlier we talked a little bit about, you said, oh, well, yeah, we all think about content and everything. And that all makes sense to me, right? Like you could reach somebody at the real time. When I started the company, but what was ironic about that time is that marketers were getting into programmatic marketing. So instead of us having to turn all the switches, we could just go ahead and distribute millions of impressions all of a sudden with the same message over and over again without it being, somewhat targeted, but at least we're just washing the internet with things. And so it goes to my theory, Scott, that we marketers are like the laziest SOBs in the space, right? Like the business world. Like none of us got here intentionally. I mean, there's some creative directors and stuff like that. Yes, there are, but most of us got to marketing because, I was really good at sales, but couldn't close a door. So Josh can talk to anyone, put him in the PR department. He'll be awesome, right? I got an accountant that's always off by 10 cents. So put him in the, analyst seat at the marketing department. So we're off by 10 cents. It really doesn't matter, right? Like it's not going to destroy the world at the end of the day,
That's
right?
funny. Yeah.
And so most of us marketers are misfit toys that ended up on this misfit island that we're doing stuff with. And so we're working through these things. But so often we do it from a jaded point of, oh, God, more work. You mean I have to do that? Like that just sounds like so much for me, right? And so if you go back to why the algorithm was created, when Facebook was going public, Chevy did a cap job on Zuckerberg 72 hours before they actually rang the bell and said, Facebook ads don't work. And of course, Zuckerberg was doing the dog and pony show with bankers on the East Coast, and his girlfriend was in from China, so he could see her. And there's a lot of things you go back and read about the time. But after they rung the bell, the stock price obviously dropped almost by double. And Zuckerberg went through and looked at what Chevy was doing, because there was also a lot of chatter that Facebook had too many advertisements in it. It was just too advertising heavy at the end of the day, and people weren't seeing their friends anymore. And the reason they showed up on the platform to begin with. So Mark looked at what Chevy was doing, and they were going ahead and using a paid campaign to boost a Chevy Volt that's a $40,000 EV to 18 to 22-year-old kids. Well, you tell me how many 18 to 20-year-old kids can go ahead and afford a $40,000 EV back, 10 years ago. It's completely mismatched marketing, right? Chevy had an agenda at the end of the day. But then he went and looked at Chevy's pages and all their brand pages, and all they were doing was dumping their television spots, their radio spots, all their PR hits, banner ads. It was just senseless advertising at the end of the day. And so he said, well, just because Chevy has 7 million people that follow it doesn't mean that they should go ahead and get to have all those posts show up in those users' feed, because they're not really doing social content. They're doing traditional media content in our space. So the algorithm was originally put in place to go ahead and force us as marketers to actually create content first for the channels we were using. And if that gets engaged with, right, if the people see it and engage with it, then all of a sudden it shows it to more people. And over time, you get higher and higher. And those brands that put out awesome content every day that gets a ton of engagement, they're not having to pay a whole lot for it, but because Facebook knows that all those engagements create more impressions for them to sell. And that's the dirty little secret, is Meta's out of impressions to sell. So they need brands to help create through the engagement more impressions for them. So when you start to think about the algorithm, that's what it's been there for. And if you go ahead and boost your posts, again, for like $5, it forces it into people's feeds, right? So then they see your content. It could be at your exact audience that went ahead and was following you, but because they didn't like last 10 posts, Meta's eliminated from their feed. Well, all of a sudden now it pops back in their feed, and they're like, oh, that's a cool post by Scott, and they hit the button. Well, now they're going to get fed your next piece of content, the next piece of content, the next piece of content, right? So by playing Facebook's game and showing them that you're willing to do it and willing to promote your content, and again, it could be really small dollars, that boost then allows you to go ahead and activate more of your current follower base. And what's also cool is you can actually boost posts to those lookalike audience we talked about. Like, hey, I want to boost to the fans of my page and people that look like them, right? And all of a sudden now you're reaching new people that are starting to come into the conversation, so you start to grow your audience, right? But as we use those boosts, we see that our organic reach for the brands that are doing it goes up along with the actual paid number of people they're reaching as well. And so it's an absolute necessary evil. People that are not boosting content inside social media, it's like shooting a television spot where you go out and spend $250,000 and then put it on your YouTube channel and just, or Venmo channel, or Vimeo channel, and just hope somebody finds it, right? Like, it's just, that's ridiculous. And that's never how it worked. Even if you shoot a TV spot, you have to go to your ABC or NBC or CBS affiliate or Hulu or whoever you want to use, and you have to pay them to show the content to your audience. So it's not that different. It's not making it different at the end of the day.
Yeah. to me, it feels like, and I don't know if it's just me, maybe somebody relates, but it feels like this thing is a moving target. I mean, you've been in the game for a long time. And it's like, as soon as, like, say I read a book, like Josh Dirks, best tips on how to get the best out of Facebook ads. I read that today. Tomorrow, Zuckerberg changes everything. And, it feels like this moving target. And, as soon as you figure it out, they change it, and it's kind of a necessary thing because they don't want you to like manipulate the system. Like you say, you can kind of play along, but they at the end of the day, they kind of want to hold the strings, not you, right? So they have to change it so that you're not too on to them. But is there, what's the best resource for like staying up to date on this stuff? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, and I'd say this about that, Scott. I also think that to borrow from Spider-Man, and I'll probably misrepresent it, but with great power comes great responsibility. I think if you think about the genesis of what Facebook was on Harvard campus and Ivy League schools and where it came from, if you think about what Instagram initially was, if you think about what Twitter initially was, these networks didn't start off to go through and connect the world. That's something that came afterwards. That Facebook introduced the whole connect the world thing in, I think, believe 2010 or 2011, when they'd already been around for a while, right? Like these are things that I think the networks have grown and matured, and things have happened that nobody could have foreseen. I don't think that Zuckerberg saw them coming. I don't think that any of these guys saw that stuff coming. And so I think that as that's happened, you've had a lot of really bad players come into the space. And just like Google changes their algorithm on a regular basis, you don't hear very many people crying about that, but everyone's crying about this space because it has to mature and change. And, unfortunately, that's due to politicians, that's due to the porn sites, that's due to the drug companies that we have and the pharmaceutical companies we have. This is what is going on. They're having to change the algorithm to keep it current so the user experience is better. And so when you think about that, it's better to have a better user experience so your people stay than actually leave at the end of the day. And so I think that it's a moving target at the end of the day. You're absolutely right. I love the IAB, the International or Interactive Advertising Bureau. If you go to their website, they have a daily email that comes out around digital marketing and social media. Just drops in your inbox, sources a bunch of different sites. Really, really nice read. Quartz News also has a digital marketing advert as well, or daily newsletter as well, that I find really, really useful and really good information about kind of what's coming and what's next. As a site to go land on, Mashable has become our CNN, a lot of ways. It's really where there's a lot of content there. Sprout Social, if you have a Sprout account, also has a ton of content that they've created for their customers. And because they've been on the MarTech side of this stuff for so long, they have a lot of really good information about data and how to change things and what they're seeing across their ecosystem. So that's a really good tool. And then if you're a ones and zeros nerd, John Loomer, who you can find him, he's an expert in kind of paid and analytics when it comes to social. We've had people go to his classes. I've listened to him speak a few times. I think he is really on it. But if you want to go way back to like an OG, I call him kind of one of the great grandfathers of the space. There's a guy named Eric Qualman who wrote a book called Socialnomics, that if you type Socialnomics on YouTube, you'll find hundreds of videos from him. But this was a book that was written in 2008 that I bought probably 200 copies of and distributed them to 55 plus old C-level execs, right, to really help them understand what was happening. And while that book was at the infancy of what we're doing, the heart and spirit of what Eric's writing about is still very much alive today and is still part of the innovation that's happening inside the space. But it is a point in time. And I thank you for going ahead and highlighting why I have not written a book about the space yet, because at the end of the day, it would probably be outdated by the time I got done typing the first sentence.
Well, you do have a book that you're close to publishing, right?
Yeah, I'm writing a book right now, kind of about it's part of this experience. It's called Beckoning the Change and Rooting to the Unknown. And it really highlights kind of a way of living. We as a species are in a state of hyper change right now, whether it's, climate or political or food or water, or whatever we're in, man. It's a crazy time right now. We're just feeling it go faster and faster. And it's so interesting because so many people were like, can I just get through 2020? And then 2021 came, and then people like 2022, right? And we're sadly racing through our lives right now, trying to get to the next year because of all the unknown that's around us. And so the book is really all the lessons that I had invested in me from my mentors through the years and my own way of personally living in a space that doesn't have rules is constantly changing, talked about. But by taking these daily activities and ensuring that you are setting yourself up to meet that change, and you become, if nothing else, change agnostic. People would say that I'm a change zealot. Like, I love to change. I change my hair, I change my facial hair all the time. I'm constantly just moving things around to see what optimizes and what works. But we need to stop telling our children to be change resistant, because any species that has been change resistant to these types of things very quickly is no longer part of the planetary species, right? At the end of the day. And I think we as the humans are at this tipping point. And I think when you look at suicide rates, when you look at what's happening right now with mental health in our country and just globally, it's really time for us to admit that we don't have the control we think we have, and that we need to start living our lives in a much more intentional and purposeful way that allow us to go ahead and live in that environment of hyper change.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And what, say the title again?
Beckoning the change and rooting into the unknown.
Beckoning the change and rooting into the unknown. Okay, we'll make sure. And is that available yet, or is it almost there?
It's not there. It'll be a month or two, I hope. We're kind of working through it, and I got to get over to the editor. But yeah, it's been. I actually started writing it during 2020, and then went through some personal things, and so realized I needed to rewrite parts of the book to kind of talk about the last few days or past few years of my own journey. So working through that kind of stuff, and the process of everything going crazy with the agency world and everything like that right now. So it's a hell of a dance.
Yeah, and so yeah, once you have the link of where people can get that, we'll update that in the show notes. So depending on when you're listening, the link may be in to get that book, Beckoning the Change and Routing into the Unknown. And yeah, you touched on, we're wrapping up, we're out of time, but you touched on something that I know that I know several business owners who have had created that level of freedom. I think majority of my audience is in that process of working on, hey, I've got this business, I'm profitable, but I'm looking to scale, I'm looking to get some freedom, build some time and systems into my business so that I can have that freedom. And you've been through that whole process, you've gotten to that place, but then, recent economics, whatever, post-COVID, whatever reason, there's been several people I know who have had to okay, I got to step back in for a while and, work on that. So that's definitely a theme I've seen with people who have experienced that freedom. So maybe at some point I'll have to have you back on and tell the rest of that story. And, where does that, because I could see having a series of interviews that would be on that topic. I think that'd be really good. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today, Josh. But I do appreciate you being here. If you want to get a hold of Josh, the website is projectbionic.com, correct? And we'll have that in the show notes.
Go to joshdirks.com as well.
Oh, joshdirks.com. Okay, we'll have that there too. And on Facebook and LinkedIn as Joshua Dirks, and people can find you there. Anything else before we wrap up today, Josh, that you wanted to leave people with?
Well, first, Scott, I really appreciate your dedication to creating content and helping other business leaders. I've known you for many, many years. I just appreciate your heart and where you're coming from. And to our audience out there that might be listening, learn to be kind to yourself right now. It's a really challenging time. And sometimes setting your own goals and your own agendas and stepping back and actually truly helping people and really thinking about how you connect deeply with people right now is going to be more beneficial than necessarily driving an intended outcome. So be kind to yourself, hug your kids on a nightly basis, and really take stock of what you have, because it's a tough time and there's a lot of hard stuff going on and people are really in a state of hurt. And I think we as leaders can be a lot gentler and a lot better right now. So I encourage us all to go out and make a difference each day, try something new each day, and make sure you're truly listening to people and seeing where you can help them, because the world needs great listeners and great compassionate leaders right now.
Amen. Well said. I love that. Thanks so much, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Life podcast. I've been your host, Scott Landis. Hey, are you feeling overwhelmed and stressed out? It could be that you're out of balance or have a misalignment of your time and priorities. This month at Awaken Life Academy, we're featuring the Total Freedom Life Wheel, designed to help you uncover what might be off balance in your work, life, and other priorities. And then it helps you realign your priorities to your purpose. Check out the full training video and the free download at wheel.awakenedlife.com. That's wheel.awakenedlife.com for free access. Don't put this personal growth opportunity off. Go get it now and start to experience the freedom that balance can bring to your life. Go to wheel.awakenedlife.com.